What's the difference between weather and climate? Weather is the short-term condition of the atmosphere in a given location. The key here is that we're talking about the short term. Weather describes what's happening right here, right now. Here are some examples of statements that describe the weather. It's pouring outside. That's describing the weather because it's explaining what's happening right here, right now. It's freezing. That's the weather too. The wind is really blowing. That's the weather. Such a foggy night. That too is the weather. Finally, it's hot today. That also describes the weather. Keep in mind, the weather can be anything on any given day, and while we do see patterns, which we'll talk about shortly, weather can fluctuate greatly. For example, in January in New York City, it's generally cold. But on any given day in January, we could have 75 or 80 degree Fahrenheit weather in New York. It would be strange, but that's the weather. It's a snapshot of what's happening right here, right now. Climate, on the other hand, is the long-term average condition of the atmosphere for a location. The key here is that climate is long-term. It's a snapshot of what we expect to see in a location based on many years of data that has been accumulated and studied and averaged out. So it gives you a picture of what to expect for a particular location, though it's important to keep in mind that the day-to-day weather could be just about anything. Here are some examples of statements that describe the climate of a particular area. It's hot and humid in the Amazon. That's an example of climate. It's not always hot and humid in the Amazon, but on average, that's what we expect to see there. Or if we were to say the South Pole is extremely cold and dry. Generally that's true, but certainly there are days where it's not true. The Sahara is arid. Yeah, the Sahara Desert is generally very arid and dry, but it does rain there from time to time. New York City is cold in the winter. Again, that's true, but we could have a warm day in January in New York. Finally, India experiences monsoon season in July. What that means is it usually is very wet and rainy in July in India, but that doesn't mean every minute of every day in July will always be wet. So to sum up, weather is what's happening outside right here, right now, while climate is what usually happens here during this time of year. Now, weather is affected by a lot of different things. These are all different factors that give you a sense of what's happening in your location at this moment. These include things like the temperature, the wind, humidity, cloud cover, precipitation, and air pressure. And all of these factors are constantly changing up and down, and together they give you your local weather. Climate, on the other hand, is affected by different things. It's affected by your latitude, how close you are to water. Are you on one side or another of a mountain range? Are you at a high altitude or elevation? Are you near a particular ocean current? Or are you in a particular wind and pressure belt? So climate is affected by many different things, as is weather, and all of those get together to give you a snapshot of what's happening at a particular instant, being the weather, and over a long period of time, being the climate. The reason this is an important distinction to make, that between weather and climate and how they're different, is because we're talking more and more about climate change. Now, when we refer to climate change, we're talking about a change in the climate patterns, which is generally attributed to increased levels of CO2 produced by the use of fossil fuels. So what we're talking about is not a change in the weather for today or tomorrow or next week, but rather a very slow, large-scale change in the average conditions for different locations on Earth. These are very slow changes, and they're generally seen when you look at long-term trends, not at day-to-day conditions. This is why it's so important to understand the difference between weather, what's happening right now, and climate, the big picture illustration of weather conditions on Earth. If you look at some recent tweets by very notable people, you'll see that not everybody understands the distinction between weather and climate. Our president recently tweeted, "Beautiful Midwest wind chill temperatures are reaching minus 60 degrees, the coldest ever recorded. In coming days, it's expected to get colder. People can't last outside even for minutes." What the hell is going on with global warming? Please come back fast. We need you. Unfortunately, our president is referring to weather conditions in the Midwest, where they experienced a cold snap that was very, very extremely cold. Unfortunately, that has nothing to do with climate. As we know, weather can fluctuate and be basically anything on any given day in any location. But if we step back and look at climate, the large-scale patterns, that's where we see the alarming things happening associated with climate change. Fortunately, we do see other notable people paying attention to this distinction and pointing it out using satire, like this interesting tweet that said, "Global warming isn't real because I was cold today." Also, great news, world hunger is over because I just ate. This is pointing out that not everybody has a clear understanding of the distinction between weather and climate. To sum up, weather, short term, climate is long term. Hope you found this video helpful. Thanks a lot.